Hello, my name is Jeffrey Cranford, and I'm here with our CEO, Jeff Hopper, in from Fresno, and we're going to talk a little bit about a topic that Jeff brought up for the first time he taught in a recent Links leader meeting that we had in Southern California. And he talked about this idea of haverim and the significance, and I thought the carryover to a Links group was so significant, and some of the principles that he's learned through this idea, and it was so beneficial that we thought we'd like to share that with you. Jeff, you did a beautiful job at our recent Links leader meeting, as I alluded to. Give us the kind of where this originated and some of the thinking that was yours as you began to kind of explore this idea of haverim. First of all, what does haverim mean, and what are some of the applications to a Links group?
Okay, well, it actually started as we were traveling in Israel last December. I was reading a book, Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus, by a couple of women who often go and do trips in the Holy Land themselves, and they brought up this topic of the haverim, which comes from haver, the Hebrew word for friend. So like when we read in Proverbs, there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother, it would be a haver who sticks closer than a brother. Someone that you have this great friendship with. David and Jonathan,
right?
Haverim. The plural is haverim. And so what they were talking about was this rabbinical tradition where two friends in study would be given maybe the same passage, a difficult passage to wrestle with in Scripture, and sent off to do their studying. And then they would come back together and they would essentially train one another on the basis of the things that they had learned. And so this idea of iron sharpening iron, you know, as that occurs, so one person sharpens another, this is essentially what they were doing with the Word and sharpening their understanding with the Word and increasing the fullness of their understanding about passages, particularly difficult passages. Well, it makes perfect sense in the context of a Links fellowship, because in a Links fellowship, that's essentially what we're doing. We're coming together around the Word. There may be somebody who is assigned to facilitate or to teach that particular week, so they've done some extra preparation. But everybody is looking at that saying, wow, what is leaping off the page at me here? What kinds of applications can we make? And because we have different life experiences and we have different educational backgrounds, biblically speaking, theologically speaking, we can bring to that context some ideas that will be very valuable to one another.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't you think you and I have essentially done that through the years? I mean, Jeff and I will have a topic, and he'll take off, and he'll say, yeah, and he'll be good to research it, and I'm thinking about it from a different perspective. And inevitably, when we get together at times like this, we don't live in the same city, we'll come together and we'll spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours talking about a topic, and invariably I get tremendous insight that I would never have gotten had it not been for Jeff, and then back and forth. Let me ask you another question. Is it part of being a haverim is in humility, but still challenging one another on particular areas? And should people be open to challenges and not run and say, well, if you just don't believe this, you're not thinking properly? And in humility, come in and say, well, let me challenge you on that, explain that more or something. Is that part of being the haverim?
Absolutely, it's part of it. And I was meeting with a Links Fellowship leader yesterday, and we were having this conversation about the fact that, unfortunately, theology has taken the course in America of a lot of political discussion. It's a lot of sound bites, or you hear the name of a particular pastor or author, and 50% of the people, immediately when they hear that name, they go, oh, I'm done with that, because they dismiss that person entirely. And the other 50% are going, this person is fabulous, I want to, you know. And we were talking about what happens in a fellowship when you have two people from a different background who that comes to some point of discussion and they're butting heads. And we talked about the fact that there can be probably nothing more significant you can do as a fellowship leader at that point than to say, you know what you guys need to do is you need to get together one-to-one and just talk about, not argue with each other, but fully explain yourself.
Right.
Where did you get this idea? Why do you hold to that particular view? Because for one, it puts the onus on each person to actually think through this. Maybe they've never thought through it. It was some one-liner that they got from a pastor, and they've always held to it because maybe this was the pastor who led them to the Lord in the first place, and so they really want to honor that person, but they don't have, they've always thought that's the only way to look at it.
Right.
And now they've run into somebody who looks at it in a different way, and just to sit down with that person and say, okay, we're not going to argue today, we're not going to try to rebut what each other's saying, we're just going to lay out the fullness. Why do I believe it? Where does it come from? That in itself creates a challenge. It challenges me to say, is there another way of looking at this?
Right.
Or maybe it challenged me to say, I can't go where you're going, but I'm going to respect you all the more now because I've heard what you're saying.
Yeah, that's good. And if you think back, it's such a biblical concept. It's unique to us. But if you even go back, even Jesus, when he was 11, 12 years old, where's Jesus? They left, and where was he? He was back in there, I think, working through these scriptures, expounding on the scriptures at a very young age with the temple leaders, And so it was an amazing picture we get. Again, same thing. You get a dynamic where in Acts 17, where Paul goes to Mars Hill, and it was the Areopagus, and they begin to debate and talk and present ideas. It's a beautiful biblical tradition. I love it with many of my Jewish friends, where they come and they're together and they go deep quickly, and there's not a fear to challenge one another and be back and forth. And no way am I trying to stereotype. I just have some friends that I say, this is a beautiful way of dialogue. I mean, I really enjoy it. It's not just the weather and this and that. I mean, so to going deep, and there's a connectivity that happens and a dynamic where I think God is really able to be glorified through that process. So I hope this has been helpful to you in various ways. Obviously, Jeff has a lot more to teach on this, and probably we should probably have something on the website at some point where it goes a little bit deeper into this teaching, which is fantastic. But I hope it's helpful to you. This is a positive outgrowth of a links group. It doesn't have to be one guy presenting. It can be. It can be then breaking off out of your normal links group and being able to go one-on-one and say, hey, let's take one book this year, just you and me, to another guy or to another gal, and say, let's go and let's just start breaking this thing apart. And you'd be amazed how much insight you'll gain and how much growth that will occur. So nice residual things in and around your links group that I think will be very helpful for you. So Jeff, thanks for bringing this teaching, and we thank you for your time, and I hope these things are helpful for you and your group.